Hi there, this is Matt with State of Flux here with a review for Spider-Man 2. For my money, this is the greatest comic book movie ever made. This movie is a absolute masterpiece. It does what every good sequel should do, which is take the elements from the first movie that really worked, build upon them, and amplify them to make them the highest possible quality they can be, while also taking the elements that didn't really necessarily work, really harken down on some of the criticisms, and find a way to either eliminate them or rework them until they are a positive for this feature. The approach to special effects was really quite unique. In the audio commentary, Sam Raimi discussed how he wanted the baseline special effects to be that the best visual effect from the first Spider-Man movie would be the worst effect for this Spider-Man movie. He wanted everything to look that much more. And I think by and large it works. There's this was early digital technology in terms of animating digital humans, so there's a couple shots that look a little weak sauce, especially if you're watching it in 4K and stuff like that. By and large, this movie looks extraordinarily good. One of the things I didn't really talk about for the first Spider-Man, and that this was done deliberately, is the look of the film. I'm pretty sure I said that the first Spider-Man movie looked good and Sam Raimi was an exquisite director and the perfect choice to make a comic book movie. But the reason I held off from really diving deep into that is because this is the movie that best reflects what a visual comic book should be. I'm not going to slight any of the modern Marvel movies or any of the modern DC movies or any comic book movie really, but I do think one of their failings is they've never been able to capture a splash page. A splash page, if you've read a comic book, is when you're reading, you turn the page and both pages are converted into one enormous panel. And this film has several of them. Sam Raimi is unequaled in terms of building a splash page for a cinema screen. And you get several of them in this film. Not the least of which would be the elements of the fight on the tower, with Doc Ock up top and Spidey down below. Like the visual language of that scene just reads wide, as if you're holding two pages open. Same thing with the scene where Spider-Man is battling Doc Ock on the train. There are other filmmakers that have managed the splash page quite well. I think Joss Whedon did it insanely well with obviously the circle shot from the Avengers, but also quite elegantly in the second Avengers as well. Again, it was sort of like the circle shot of everybody, all the action happening at once kind of thing, right as Ultron's minions invade. Zack Snyder has done it a couple of times. Batman vs. Superman has what would be a beautiful splash page, as spoiler alert for that film. The Trinity is standing over the dead body of Superman. But Sam Raimi is really unequaled. He had a couple would-be splash pages in the first one. This film has several, and Spider-Man 3 will have even more. Just watch these movies on mute if you wish to, and just experience the visual storytelling of the movie. You can understand every element of what's going on the way it's photographed, and some of it seems so big it leaps off the screen right directly at you, and that is insanely powerful. He's always been one of the strongest visual filmmakers, I think, since his emergence with even that first Evil Dead. I think if you want to study film, I think one of the first movies you should really understand if you're trying to, when you're teaching about camera technique, watch that first Evil Dead. Sam Raimi is a master classman of like giving you interesting visuals with what would normally be relatively mundane setting. And this movie, as I say, is just extraordinary to look at. Speaking of Evil Dead, he has a sequence in this. He implements a lot of his like horror techniques that he sprangboard off of from those early Evil Dead movies with the character of Dr. Octopus. There is almost no scene better in any comic book movie than the scene where Doc Ock, the tentacles reveal that they are alive when they're getting surgically removed from him. And the battle between the arms as they're just like whipping about, killing all the surgeons around him. That scene is extraordinarily well done. Photographed beautifully, lit beautifully. It's lit like a Frankenstein-y horror movie, and like the horror movie techniques and how it came to be is so great. And this is where I talked about in the first Spider-Man movie how some people criticize that movie for not being close to the comics. My argument is that the thing that they're actually talking about is that his web shooters are organic and not like something that he built with his genius. But it's entirely bunk. That first Spider-Man movie is a perfect representation of 60s and early 70s Spider-Man comics. This movie is an extension of that. And this movie goes one deeper. By implementing these horror movie techniques, it's really diving into where superhero story arcs in the comics really came from. A lot of them emerged from horror comics. And it's not lost on me that like Superman was originally, in its first incarnation, was designed as a horror movie villain, or not a horror movie villain, horror comic villain. Then they pitched the idea and revamped it to the Superman that we're a little more familiar with. Batman's whole dark detective noir thing could easily read as horror comics. Spider-Man especially so. This is a man who's bit by a radioactive spider. Spiders are the creepy bug that people are freaked about, right? And if you read a lot of those early Spider-Man comics, and really most of Stan Lee's early superhero, early superhero comics in the Marvel that we are familiar with, the Fantastic Four, Hulk, stuff like that, they're very horror-esque, horror-adjacent. And so having a filmmaker whose start also was in horror, and then having him use those techniques but then twist them into the genre that is emerging now as the superhero genre, effing brilliant. This movie is so perfect at utilizing and blending the different narratives that make superhero comics and movies and storytelling what it is and what they need to be. Sam Raimi's use of drama that he really got to hone with films like A Simple Plan and For Love of the Game and The Gift is implemented well in both the first and second Spider-Man movie here. The use of horror in this film, as just mentioned with the Evil Dead, his use of comedy with films like Crime Wave and Army of Darkness, which are very comedically lent films, implemented to great work in this film, while also giving us the action horror icon that we need from like Darkman or Army of Darkness. And also having even more visual quotes from Superman, the original Superman movie by Richard Donner. This one borrows loosely from the plot of Superman 2. Its ode to Superman, a continuing ode to the Superman mythos, is that Superman 2 is about Superman giving up his power willfully, whereas this film is about Spider-Man losing his power by choice, that word again, the main thesis of that first film is all about choice. Spider-Man, Peter Parker starts losing his powers in the second Spider-Man feature, and that is partially by choice, partially by a lack of focus. And I think this is brilliantly drawn upon with the scene where Spider-Man suddenly can't see anymore and he has to wear his glasses. And then when he's presented with the reason why he needs to be Spider-Man in the first place, that reason to rise above, he has the scene where he has the glasses on, he can't see, he takes them off, it's perfectly focused. He drops it and you see the glasses just land in the frame. Epic shot. But this film is really about responsibility. Peter Parker has to examine his responsibilities. The whole film is about responsibility. His responsibility to get or keep a job. His responsibility to do school, to be there for Mary Jane when he can be, and to be Spider-Man. He can't do any of that stuff. All these elements kind of come together, and the film's keeps coming back to responsibility. So much so that finally, when Peter Parker has ditched the Spider-Man no more, one of the first things he does is he owns up to Aunt May, and he finally takes responsibility for what his involvement was with Uncle Ben's death. And he takes the responsibility of being Spider-Man, and in doing so kind of hurts MJ. And that will be a storyline that they extrapolate upon in the next film. This film is just exquisitely well written. The use of character drama, while always having just a hint of comedy to undercut in true Marvel fashion. These two movies are like the blueprint of the MCU. It's unparalleled. As I was saying before, Superman 2, Peter Parker gets rid of his powers and chooses to act selfishly, or not necessarily even selfishly, but just indulge in his own personal needs. But in doing so, neglects his responsibilities. But as Spider-Man, but as Peter Parker, he's able to be there for those that he cares for. Yet somehow he still ends up hurting them. And that's kind of the fascinating thing when you examine his responsibilities under a microscope. And Uncle Ben's Cliff Roberts is brought back in a very beautiful scene right before he makes the decision to be Spider-Man no more. But he keeps getting brought back into becoming Spider-Man because the world at this point needs Spider-Man. It's just exceptionally well written. Alan Sargent wrote the is it Alan Sargent or Alvin Sargent? He wrote the screenplay along with a few other people, including the writers of Smallville and the first couple seasons of Smallville, anyway, and a handful of others. But it's this screenplay is one of the strongest superhero screenplays ever written. There is no weak element to it. The only complaint I have about this film across the board is that they still utilize the damsel in distress in the finale. MJ is still utilized in such a way, which is frankly disappointing. But in addressing my problems with the previous Spider-Man, I had a problem with that film's use of people of color having just generally poor use of people of color. In this film you get a lot more diversity in the cast. Of course it's all extras, but can't win them all, right? But you have a good mix of people of color, like sort of building the rest of the world around him. And even though they're small character moments, they might just be like one line. It helps fill the world, and every single one of them is pretty damn memorable, and I kind of love it. And speaking to the damsel in distress thing, that happens a couple of times, but I like how both times it happens in this, the women character ends up trying to fight back. Once successfully with Aunt May hitting Doc Ock in the back of the head, and once unsuccessfully when MJ tries to do the exact same thing, but Doc Ock had learned by this point. Good time to talk about Doc Ock, and really the two villains of this film are Dr. Octopus and Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn is utilized so terrifically in this film. This is how you develop a character who you later want to become a villain, and do it over a prolonged period of time. He's not the most amazing character in that first movie, but he's a memorable presence. But his transition from best friend Harry to continuing to be best friend Harry with a mission to kill Superman or Spider-Man is incredibly organic. It feels so natural. And James Franco's performance as this is his best performance I think he's ever done in any movie. This is his strongest dramatic work, comes from this film. He is extraordinarily good in every single scene that he is in. He is a problematic figure, and it's hard to justify actions of problematic people, and that is the big regret, I guess, of these movies, is that they have such a problematic figure in them in such a high-profile role. But I don't want to not acknowledge his extraordinary presence in this film, because he really elevates every single scene he's in. But I do condemn his actions on set and off camera and stuff like that. Moving on to Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. He is absolutely captivating, completely likable, and nurturing teacher, a little bit of a hard-ass, perfect mentor figure to Peter Parker. And when he goes evil, he's not arch. He doesn't go over the top like Willem Dafoe did with the first one, also excellently. His is much more internalized. He doesn't care what's happening around him. All he wants is to get his job done, which he knows that he can do, and it was just a mistake that it didn't happen right the first time. And so he's center-focused. Everything around him is superfluous. He needs to achieve his mission, and he will stop at nothing to do it. Excellently performed. Brilliantly written and performed. I loved it. He is extraordinary in this film. MJ, I thought, was great in this. Kirsten Dunst, as I said in the first one, is a very underrated actress. She really helps elevate this film. But this is Tobey Maguire's movie. This is, just as I said that this was James Franco's best performance, I also think this is Tobey Maguire's best performance. He was also in a movie called Brothers, which is extraordinarily good examination of what happens to the psyche with war. And he's extremely good in that, and he should have been nominated for an Oscar, and he wasn't, because this is a criminal world that we live in. But Tobey Maguire, exceptionally good in this movie. He just wears everything you need him to wear in his eyes. You get every emotion, and his ability to switch from being just such a oddball doofus to being sincere leading man guy is unparalleled. He is extremely good. And the way that Peter Parker is written, his brilliance is really amplified and really paid honor to in both the first one, but especially this Spider-Man movie. And that is something where I also feel like the people, the naysayers for these movies that don't like how not comic book they are, who are really talking about the web shooters. So what that he didn't build his own web shooters? This is the Spider-Man that is demonstrated to have extreme intelligence all the way through, whereas the next guy, I'm not going to criticize either of the next two Spider-Man's work because I think both actors bring extraordinary elements to the role each time, but the next guy is like Abercrombie and Fitch model dude, like millennial. And then Tom Holland is not necessarily, like, he's intelligent, you can tell, but he's not brought up to be like a hyper intelligent guy. This Peter Parker is. He is very logical, and he is consistently presented as being the most intelligent person in any room that he's in, even when he is in the room with another genius such as Dr. Otto Octavius. He goes toe-to-toe with them. It's great. Again, the writing is amazing. Danny Elfman's score in this is pretty much the same as it was in the first one, but the Dr. Octopus theme is very like 50s monster movie. Absolutely adored it. Yeah, so the score is great. J.K. Simmons, once again, just elevating the hell out of the scene. This is Bruce Campbell's cameo, and this one is even better than his cameo in the first one. Same thing with Ted Raimi. Elizabeth Banks is great in this as well. I really liked her. She only has one scene that really kind of allows her to soar, but that one scene is very memorable and I quite like it. That character was much bigger in the early comics than she is allowed to be in this film, but she is really, really good. Yeah, I appreciated her presence in this film. So anyway, this movie is absolute perfection. 4 stars for me. I said it before, the only criticism I have of the film really is the use of the damsel in distress thing. The other one, incredibly mild criticism I would have, would be that the kind of recycles the first Spider-Man in that the two villains are directly closely related to Spider-Man and are both kind of goleming the whole time. This time we just don't hear the voice of the tentacles. Tentacles look great in this movie. All the special effects do. The train scene is the single greatest action scene in any comic book movie ever. Watch that scene and study the perfection that it is, as well as the scene that follows it with just the real street level people watching this street level kid and realizing that it could be them that got bit by the radioactive spider and Spider-Man. It's a perfect scene. Everything about that scene is amazing. This whole movie is a perfect 4-star movie. I adore it. Up next, I will discuss Spider-Man 3, and before you write that film off, I think you should give that one a second watch. As you should give all these movies a watch. If you haven't watched Spider-Man 2, go back, do yourself a favor and watch it again. It is great. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Ding the bell if you want to see more of my reviews. I will leave you off with this. One of the things that I praise about the Raimi Spider-Man ones is how incredibly close they are to the comics. For being incredibly close to the comics, they completely revamped this dude's storyline for this film in a unique way, and it works. That's the way that you would do an adaptation where you're trying to fix maybe necessary mistakes. He doesn't read the same as you watch this character. He doesn't read the same if you've read the comic books. But yet nobody has a problem with how he was adapted because it's written organically into the screenplay and it's so profoundly well written. That's the remarkable thing about these Raimi movies. You can deviate from the source material, or you can be married to it, and people kind of embraced both times around with the first and second Spider-Man movie. Something went awry with the third one, and we will assess that here shortly. So, thanks for watching. Peace.